to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Hope Wilson. This podcast is designed to encourage and equip you to be a trailblazer right where you are, to help you discover your God-given purpose and bring you talks each week that will inspire you to do what you were made for. Each week, we will walk through different topics to help you grow in your life, career, and leadership. My hope is that you'll become poised for purpose and walk in that daily. I hope each week you'll feel more equipped to be a trailblazer right where you are. So let's get into this week's episode. I'm excited for this week's episode because we started a series last week that was all about living intentionally. And last week we talked all about living intentionally with our relationships and our friendships. And this week I want to talk about what it means to live intentionally in our everyday lives. What does intentional living mean? You may have seen that in my Instagram bio. You may have heard me talk about this a lot, but I want to talk about what does it mean to live intentionally? Last week, we defined what intentional means, and it's living on purpose. And we talked about how to be more intentional in our friendships and relationships, but this goes beyond just being intentional with people in our lives. Intentional living is kind of the next step in that. It becomes more of a lifestyle, a way of living our lives with intention. So often, we get so busy and we allow life and everything else to happen to us versus us being a little more purposeful with our time and with our lives. But time so easily gets away from us. So I totally understand how we can just live not quite intentionally as we hope to live. We have the best, intentions for our life, but unless we live intentionally, it's going to be hard for us to not feel so frantic and to not feel so busy. And I know that unfortunately, time is one of the things that we never get back. Once we spend time, it's gone forever. And a few years ago, that was me. I was running hard and fast, and I didn't really feel like I was going very far. I just kind of kept burning out. I had all these big dreams and all these passions, and I felt like I wanted to do all these things. I wanted to go far, but I didn't really know where to start. I didn't have good systems in place. I didn't have good rhythms. I've always been kind of this intentional person, but I wasn't necessarily living my life intentionally, if that makes sense. And whenever you are an intentional person, but you're not living intentionally, there's a big difference with that. Being an intentional person to me means that you can take care of the people in your life. You're thoughtful, caring, kind. You do what you can to put others first in a lot of ways, but living intentionally is more than that. It's about how you spend your time, what you spend your time on, creating rhythms, routines, systems to help spend your time with intention. It's also living a bit slower. And by slow, I don't mean lazy. I don't mean that you're just going to be slow at everything you do. I think it means we live in such a hustle culture. We live in such a culture that's go, go, go all the time, need everything faster, more furious. Like we don't have time for that kind of thing. But I think what happens when we live in this hustle mentality is we burn out easier. We struggle to keep up. We always feel like we're tired and exhausted, and we're always working for rest. But whenever you are living a bit slower and whenever you are living from this place of intentionality, you're living from a place of rest. You're not living to get rest. You're living from a place of rest. And you aren't in a rush because you know you'll get there when you're meant to, and you won't get there at all if you don't have an intentional lifestyle that helps you get there. I read a book recently that is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And you may have heard me talk about this before because it has easily become one of my favorite books. And you may have even heard other people talk about it, or maybe you've read it yourself. But there's a quote in that book that I really love, and it says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And when I first read this quote, something shifted for me. I realized that I had all these goals and hopes and dreams, and I was spinning my wheels in what seemed like mud because I didn't really have good systems in place. I would have different habits or different things like that, but I never really had these great systems in place that helped me live life easier. And my systems today aren't perfect, and sometimes I still even fall out of rhythm or fall out of habit with things, but I definitely feel a big difference when I'm living intentionally versus when I'm letting life just happen. And let me also say that you don't have to be super type A or organized to live intentionally. there's simple things that you can begin to do that can help you each week to live life with more intention and purpose. So I hope that if you're listening and you're hearing me talk all about this and you're like, well, Courtney, I'm not an organized person, or I like to be more spur of the moment, or I like to, just do things on the fly. I think you can have a little bit of both. I think you can live intentionally and still have plenty of room for flexibility and plenty of room for spontaneity, because I know for my life that is true. So if you're taking notes, maybe you're driving, so maybe you can't take notes, but if you're listening to this and you want to take notes, I'm going to give a few different ideas and tips that have helped me practically with being able to live my life more intentionally. The first thing that I always recommend people do is evaluate how you're spending your time. What needs the most of your time? What's getting the most of your time? Where do you want the most of your time to be spent? And this really looks different for everyone depending on, what season of life you're currently in. And it can also shift during different seasons, because some seasons we have a lot more time on our hands where we can really do whatever we want to do. Other seasons we're taking care of other people, or working more, or going for a promotion, or whatever that season looks like. So every season of life is going to look a little bit different, and you have to reevaluate this in each season of your life. But you kind of have to figure out what your priorities are in life. And in order to live more intentionally, we have to know where we're giving our time so that we can either fix some areas to allow us to be more purposeful with our time in those areas that matter most to us, or that we can spend more time in areas without feeling so frantic or busy all the time. So are there any areas of your life that feel most frantic or unorganized that cause you to really be stressed? Is there anything in your home or in your work or in your daily life that causes you the most stress that you have some type of control over? And what systems or organization could you create that might help it be less stressful? For me, I have a lot coming up this summer. And so I normally keep a whiteboard calendar anyways, but it's just for 1 month. And I realized that it was really stressing me out knowing that I have stuff coming up over the next 4 months and not being able to see it all on paper and plan it out more diligently. So I went and bought 4 whiteboard calendars that are small to replace the one large one, so that I was able to kind of whiteboard and see everything that I have going on. So maybe for you need to have a larger calendar, or you need to be able to see everything you have coming up so you don't feel so overwhelmed by it. Or maybe it's pre-packaging food so that you don't have to do it last minute. Either way, I would just evaluate these different areas and write a few things down. If you have kids, maybe it's coming up with a different system for their toys or for their playtime, or anything like that can make your life feel a little bit easier and less frantic and less like you have to clean up all the time. And the next thing that I would suggest is taking time at the beginning of each week to sit down and plan out your week at a time that works best for you, whether it's Sunday or Monday. If you're married, do this with your spouse. Either way, it's a good idea to just sit down at the beginning of your week and write out everything that you know is coming up on your calendar for that week. Whatever meetings you know are coming up, whatever priorities or goals you have for that week that you absolutely have to accomplish. Maybe it's just getting laundry done. Maybe it's trying a new hobby, or whatever it is. And then you can kind of know that what you have to accomplish and what also your free time looks like. For me, when I sit down and write this out, it helps me to breathe easier, and it also helps me to stress less, because I feel confident going into the week knowing what I can say yes to and what I need to say no to as things pop up. I also like to go ahead and designate different tasks to different days. So for me, I know, laundry day was probably going to be Thursday, and then podcast recording is going to be on Monday night, and then editing on Tuesday night. And then I also know that Wednesday night is my free night. So I can either hang out with people on that night or just have a chill night at home. And in the past, I would feel so frantic not having designated days for things. I would get stressed feeling like I had to have a million things to do all at once. And I would try to get too much done each day instead of spreading things out with more of a plan. I would just feel super frantic all the time, and eventually I would burn out. So I highly recommend this of planning your week each week, because it really does help. One of the other things that has helped me is planning my meals, or having some version of meal prep, even if I'm not cooking full meals ahead of time. Maybe it's just having different items organized or as prepped as I can make it for the week, so that it's easier when it comes time to making meals, that I don't have to think about it as hard. I already kind of know that I have these different things cut up or prepped, or if I'm tired, I already have options for for if I don't want to cook that night, or if I do want to cook, I don't have to take as much time cutting everything up because most of the prep work is already done. So I would definitely encourage you to sit down weekly and plan out the things we just talked about, and also take time to evaluate monthly. See what rhythms are working, see which ones are not working, so that you can continue to live more intentionally. Because I believe that, God gave us a beautiful life to live, and He is an intentional God. If you look throughout Scripture, He's so intentional with everything He does. And I think that He would love to see us living our lives with more intention too. And I think by doing this, it'll give us much more peace of mind. It will help us to have more organization in our lives. It'll help us to not feel so frantic and not have to give in to hustle culture. We can be intentional with our lives by living intentionally and doing some of these different tips. And if you want more resources on living intentionally, there's going to be more resources coming up on my blog. And we still have one more episode in this series on intentional living. And so I hope that these tips in today's conversation were helpful to you. And I hope it can help you to jumpstart living a more intentional life. Next week, we're going to wrap this up with talking about intentional financial habits. And I think this one's going to be super beneficial, and it's going to help us with being more intentional with our spending and our saving. And I know that this is something that has been more of a struggle for me over the years, and thinking through this and thinking through how to live intentionally with my finances has been such a game changer for me. So I'm really excited to share some tips with you guys next week on that. So I hope you'll join me next week for the last part of this series before we start our new series in May. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you can get episodes right away when they come out every week. And also, I would love for you to sign up for our newsletter so that you can get episodes and updates sent straight to your inbox. And no worries, I will not be spamming you or anything like that, but I just want to be able to send you guys the episodes each week to your inbox in case that works better for you. As always, I always appreciate your support for the show. And if you ever have any questions, you're welcome to email us at hello@thetrailblazerjournals.com. I hope you have an incredible week, and I'll see you back here next time.